Hello and welcome. The music you just heard was completely recorded with Serum 2. And in this video I will show you how I created the sounds that I used in that music. I would like to start with a drone or a bass patch, so I'm starting with a fresh instance of Serum. If you don't have an init patch when you load Serum, I think it depends on the version, you need to click on menu and init preset, and then you have this nice sawtooth. For this patch, I would like to use something based on FM. So in the wavetable section, I select basic shapes, and then here in the warp section, I click on FM, FMB, which means that oscillator B will modulate oscillator A. Right now, nothing is happening because oscillator B is empty. So I need to load another wavetable into oscillator B. I also take the basic shapes waveform. Now I will mute oscillator B because I only wanted to modulate oscillator A. And now this happens with the sound. You can also play with the octaves to get different sounds. How can we make this more interesting? It could be possible to modulate the FM intensity with an LFO. Of course, we don't want to make dubstep music, so this should be a bit more subtle. First, I switch the rate to Hertz and set it to a very slow value. And also the intensity of the modulation shouldn't be too high. In the end result, you should barely notice what's going on there. We also need to shape envelope 1 a little bit to have a smooth attack and also a long release. I want this to be a bit wider, so I'm now taking oscillator C, and I want to use a unison thing. So let me mute A and B first. This is the sawtooth, and when I increase the unison, I get this nice sound. Of course, this also needs to be an octave lower. And then I want to take away the high frequencies. Let's open an instance of this one so that you see what's going on. You see that we now have all the high frequencies. And if I select activate filter 1, nothing happens. But when I activate oscillator C or route oscillator C into that filter and we lower the frequency, you see that it takes away the high frequencies. We can accentuate this a little bit with the resonance. We could also spend an hour on selecting the best filter mode, but if it sounds nice with the first mode, yeah, it's fine, I think. Now let's mix those two sources together. This is the first one and this one. It could also be possible to take another LFO, also with a very slow rate, and put it to the filter. To have some movement here as well. It's important to understand that oscillator A, our FM oscillator, does not go into the filter. It would be pointless because oscillator A only produces sounds. This is the root node, and we have some overtones created by this FM modulation, and it just goes up to 1K, so 1000 Hertz. So it would be pointless to filter it with the low-pass filter, in my opinion. So both together, quite nice. I want to have some little effects on that one. maybe with the delay, we have to be careful what we do with the delay. So we need to filter out all the low frequencies in that delay. By the way, a little trick that I like to do, I put a utility in there and put it to -infinite. So when I play a note and then hit the switch, I only hear the delay. And now we have no delay at all, because we filtered out the low frequencies. Okay, yeah, that could be a bit longer, I think. Yeah, that's nice. Next, I want to have a reverb. Of course, not too much. There are people who say that you must not put any reverb on the bass. Yeah, I still do. I'm not writing a book on mixing, I'm making music and I like the sound, so yeah, I do reverb on the bass. Let's see how it sounds. Now I want to use the clip function to record something that I can use later in my music. Sometimes I like to include some ideas of melodies or sequences right into the patch, so that when you load the patch later, you can get an idea of what the patch is supposed to do. So I'm going to the clip. I'm not doing a live recording because I'm just playing one note. I'm putting the length to 16 bars. And try to find the note, which is this one, and I put it right here. I decided that I want this to be in B flat. B flat. Does it react on what you do here? No, it doesn't. Well, I don't care. So now we have this going on in the clip here in Serum. The next sound should be a pad sound. I'm dragging a new empty instance of Serum into Ableton, and I select a wavetable called Ethos from the digital folder. It doesn't sound too harsh. It's more of a kind of mellow thing, I would say. I right-click on the wavetable knob and select Smooth Interpolation. So when I automate this with an LFO, I get a nice, clean modulation and not these steps in between. This should be a bit wider, so I'm using the unison again. That might be a good starting point. Of course, I have to modulate the wavetable position, again with a very slow LFO. So I'm selecting LFO 1, put it to a very slow rate, and drag it to the wavetable position. We also, why is it always on envelope 4? We also need to change envelope 1. All right, now it's time for some filtering. So in filter 1, this time I want to go for the expander multimode filter. It's a new filter from Serum 2. It's modeled after the Oberheim Expander or SEM filter, also used on the Oberheim OV6. And it's a 12 dB filter, so I think it's nice for this kind of pad sounds. Oscillator B should get the same wavetable, so I'm copying oscillator A, right-click on oscillator A to bring this menu, and then I paste it here. But oscillator B should be modulated with another modulator, because it sounds too static if you modulate both with the same LFO, so I'm using another one here. And also I will change the pitch from 0 to +7, which will be the 5th interval. Also, this must go into the filter. From there, we can go to the Effects tab first and do some crazy stuff. First, I would like to have the bowl frequency shifter, which does nice things if you set it to a slow speed or slow range. It also adds some nice movement to the panorama, probably because of the width. Yeah, fantastic. Next, I need a delay, and I made a preset which I would like to load. It's called Delay Endless. You can copy the settings. It's just one page here. And this one creates quite the large amount of delay. Yeah. And after that, we need reverb. And also I created a preset which gives us a huge tail of sound. Now sometimes we might want to deactivate this to shape the sound. Yeah, this is still a little bit harsh. I wonder if there are methods of changing this. Yeah, this is better. Maybe I also want to have a little modulation of the pitch. still too fast. Yeah, this is the speed. Yeah, that's better. Maybe I want the higher notes on the keyboard to be less filtered by the low pass filter, so I'm taking the note modulation source and put it to the filter. So now the high notes have a higher frequency range, a higher cutoff setting than yeah, this is nice. I leave it like this. Let's hear it together with the other sound, with the drone. And again, I would like to put this into a little clip here. So I'm creating a 16-bar loop. And for some reason, I have to wait until the playhead is back at the beginning, and then I will play some notes. We are in B flat, so I'm basically using B flat, the fifth, which would be the F. I'm also using the E flat and the A flat, so these are my notes. I think this is cool. The next sound should be sequencer sound. I would like to have a very spacey and washed out sequencer sound, which sounds very atmospheric. To achieve this, I start with a new instance of Serum and I select a wavetable from the analog folder, which is called Plates Modal. It's probably sampled from the Mutable Instruments Plates module, which is also a digital module, so I don't understand why it appears under the analog category. Whatever. This is the wavetable. And I start by programming the sequence first. We are still in B flat. So I select a few B flats and Fs and also A flats. We can double this to make it a bit more interesting. Oh, no, the whole sequence, please. Double entire clip. And then add a few notes change a few notes. Maybe add a few ratchet notes here. Also make sure that they don't appear at the same position. So this is on the 4th beat and this on the 3rd beat. Yeah, this is very boring and will completely go on your nerves after a short while. First thing is shorten the envelope. Much better already. Then randomly modulate the wavetable. There is no dedicated random module in Serum, so it's all in the LFO module where you can select S and H, which means sample and hold. And we want this to be on retrigger and the rate is on the lowest possible value. So what will now happen if we put this somewhere is we will get a new value with every note that is being triggered or pressed. We repeat the same thing on the second LFO and route this to the panorama. And also another one to slightly modulate the decay so that the sound gets longer and shorter on its own. What we can also do is we can copy that thing to another oscillator. Can we? If we don't click on the wrong button, we can, yeah. And this one should be an octave higher. Of course, we can take another, maybe the second LFO also to modulate the wavetable position. And this one to the panorama. But I want this high note only to appear not so often. So what I do is I take the 4th random generator and put it here to the level. If the modulation is bipolar and the original value is set to 0, then we will have a lot of values which are below 0, which means that the oscillator is completely silent. I'm doing this because I only want this higher note to appear not so often. So it would be nice to have some chance parameter here, some more advanced ways of doing random stuff. Another thing, I want to have a very, very, very short envelope and put it to the pitch, which sounds awful. At first. So first we need to put this into unipolar mode and have it very, very short. And when you then increase the intensity, you get this nice clicky sound. Because this is also quite annoying when it happens all the time, I take another random LFO. And this one is the auxiliary source. In the mod matrix you have a source and a destination. And when you apply an aux source, it means that another modulation source affects the intensity of the amount. So when I select LFO5, you can hear how this clicky sound only appears when this modulation, this random modulation is on a higher value. Yeah, so now we need a lot of effects. Maybe I start with some little bit crushing stuff with the distortion. So it's, for some reason it's in the distortion section. Yeah, it's called downsample. This is too much. Just a little bit. And then we need a delay, which should be 2 dotted eighth notes. Maybe listen to it in the context of the other sounds. And it's Crazy Sunday, so I would like to have another delay in series with a quarter note. And of course we also need a reverb. I don't like the way how this click sound appears in the reverb. As much as I like Serum 2 for its synthesis capabilities, I'm not a huge fan of the effects. In real life I would rather use Black Hole, Immersive or Valhalla DSP Vintage Verb for the sequences sound. Okay, we can now talk about the possibility to use a filter here. So we could take envelope 3. With 12 dB mode, it sounds more like a low pass gate. I just applied a random curve with the smooth parameter on maximum to the filter so that the sound fades in and out on a random basis. Maybe I also want a third oscillator with a sine wave. Yeah, it supports the sound a little bit. The last sound for this little experiment should be a pad sound, which we can also use as a lead sound for some melodies in the higher range. First, I would like to find a suitable wavetable. It shouldn't be too harsh. A lot of those wavetables in Serum are designed for very aggressive kind of electronic music, so it's always difficult to find the right wavetable. There is one I used for another sound yesterday, which is called voxel. If you modulate this with an LFO, you get something that almost sounds like a voice, like a sample. Since I used it yesterday, I need to find another one for today, but maybe there are similar wavetables somewhere. There's something called talking vox, which is clearly not a voice. Vocal hum. Ah, that's not bad. This is a bit stupid if you play it like this, but if we boost it with the unison, it's much better. Also, we need to find a second wavetable, which also is a bit more gentle. Maybe we have, it says smooth here. It's just a series of sawtooth. Maybe here. Yeah, this could work when it's reduced with the filter. I will move the low pass filter to filter 2 because I would like to have some phaser or something on filter 1. In the filters 2, no, where is it? Flanges, multi. Yeah, we have some nice Yeah, this cries for a very slow modulation with another LFO, maybe something like this. And now the output of filter 1 must go into filter 2. You can either do it by clicking on the M button here and select filter 2, or you could also go into the mix page, which I didn't touch yet today, and there you can also select the routing. And now filter 2 gets again, I want to have some pitch tracking, key tracking. So higher notes have a higher frequency of the filter. And of course, we need our effects. I'm lazy, I load the presets that I showed you before, because I know that they work with those kinds of sounds. And now we have a nice pad kind of lead, pad-lead sound to go on top of the rest. This is just for the sake of demonstration. In a real-life situation, I wouldn't make this into 16-bar loops all the time, because it would repeat endlessly and be quite boring after a while. So I would aim for different length of loops, have maybe more space in between the notes, but I think you get the idea. Somehow I now have the desire to add another sequencer sound, maybe a bit more of classic sound. And I quickly do this before I close the session for today. The very basic four note sequence, very difficult. For the wavetable, I select maybe this one. Also, I want to have sorry, I forgot to explain what I'm doing. I want to have the sub oscillator playing only the first note. Yeah, let's put a very slow modulation of the cutoff frequency in here so that I don't need to do this manually all the time. So I have no idea how this, oh, that was an hour and 6 minutes, probably a bit less after editing, but this is how I would approach a new track, how I would approach creating some new sounds for my library. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed watching this, and thanks a lot for watching, and see you next time.